The sound of glass shattering echoed through the house before anyone could stop it. A framed family portrait lay broken on the floor, its cracked surface splitting the smiling faces into jagged pieces. 16-year-old Marcus stood frozen, his chest rising and falling like he had just run for miles. His mother, Denise, clutched the edge of the dining table, her knuckles pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. And in the doorway, caught between escape and explanation, stood Harold, the man who had just destroyed everything. Behind him was a woman no one had ever seen before. She held a small overnight bag, her face tense but defiant, like someone who had rehearsed this moment but still wasn't ready for its consequences. The silence that followed was heavier than the crash. Even 8-year-old Leela, who had been playing in the corner moments ago, now stood still, her doll hanging loosely from her hand. Denise's voice came out low and shaking. "Tell me, this is not what it looks like." Harold didn't answer immediately. He glanced at the woman beside him, then back at his family. That hesitation was all the confirmation Denise needed. Marcus stepped forward, anger blazing in his eyes. "You brought her here, into our house." The woman shifted uncomfortably, but Harold placed a hand on her shoulder as if to steady her, or maybe himself. "I didn't want it to happen like this," he finally said, his voice strained. "But you all deserve to know the truth." "The truth?" Denise let out a hollow laugh. "After all these years, now you want to talk about truth." Leela ran to her mother, wrapping her arms around her waist. "Mommy, what's going on?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Denise couldn't answer. Her eyes were locked on Harold, searching for something, remorse, regret, anything, but finding nothing she recognized. Marcus clenched his fists. "Say it," he demanded. "Say what you've been doing behind our backs." Harold swallowed hard, then spoke the words that would never be forgotten. "I've been seeing her for 3 years." The room seemed to tilt. 3 years, not a mistake, not a moment of weakness, a whole secret life. Denise staggered back slightly, as if the words had physically struck her. 3 years meant birthdays, anniversaries, family dinners, all of it had been a lie. "You've been lying to us every single day," Marcus said, his voice breaking despite his anger. "Every day you came home and acted like nothing was wrong." "It's not that simple," Harold tried to explain. "Nothing about this is simple," Denise snapped, her voice rising for the first time. "You didn't just betray me, you betrayed your children." The woman beside Harold finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "He was unhappy." Those 2 words ignited something dangerous. Marcus stepped closer, his voice cold. "You don't get to talk." But Denise raised a hand, stopping him. Her eyes were now fixed on the stranger. "Unhappy," she repeated slowly. "So your solution was to tear apart a family." Harold shook his head. "I never wanted to hurt anyone." "But you did," Denise said quietly. "And you don't even understand how deep this goes." Leela began to cry softly, confused and afraid. Marcus turned away, running his hands through his hair as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. Then Denise said something that made the entire room go still again. "Does she know?" she asked. Harold frowned. "Know what?" Denise's voice dropped to a whisper, heavy with something darker than anger. "Does she know what you've already done to this family?" The woman's expression changed instantly. "What is she talking about?" she asked, looking at Harold. Harold didn't answer. And in that silence, something far worse than betrayal began to surface. What had he done? Harold's silence stretched too long. The woman beside him slowly pulled her arm away from his grip. "Harold, what is she talking about?" she asked again, this time with unease creeping into her voice. Denise stepped forward, her eyes locked on him like she was daring him to lie again. "Go on," she said. "Tell her about the money." Marcus turned sharply. "What money?" Harold's face tightened. "Denise, this is not the time." "Oh, it's exactly the time," she cut in. "You brought your secrets into this house, so let's open all of them." The tension in the room shifted. This wasn't just about cheating anymore. Denise pointed toward the hallway. "Marcus, remember when your college fund disappeared last year? when your father said the bank made an error. Marcus's eyes widened. Yeah, they said it was a processing issue. You told me not to worry. Denise didn't look away from Harold. There was no error. The words landed like thunder. Marcus stared at his father. What does she mean? Harold finally spoke, but his voice lacked strength. I was going to fix it. Fix it? Denise laughed bitterly. You drained your own son's future to fund your secret life. The woman stepped back, shaking her head. No, that's not true. Harold told me he had investments. He said he was just moving money around. Denise's expression hardened. Of course he did. That's what liars do. They build stories strong enough for everyone to believe until they collapse. Leela looked up at her brother, confused. Marcus, what's happening? Marcus didn't answer. His eyes were still locked on Harold, searching for denial, for something to prove this wasn't real. But Harold said nothing. And that silence confirmed everything. You stole from me, Marcus said quietly, his voice trembling in a way that was more dangerous than shouting. Your own son. I was going to pay it back, Harold insisted. I just needed time. For 3 years, Denise snapped. 3 years of lies, sneaking around and stealing from your family. The woman's face had completely changed now. The confidence she walked in with was gone, replaced by doubt. Harold, you told me you were separated, she said slowly. You said things were already over here. Denise let out a sharp breath. Separated? We were planning Leela's birthday together last month. The woman looked between them, realization dawning like a slow, painful sunrise. You lied to me too. Harold ran a hand over his face. I didn't mean for it to get this far. But it did, Marcus said. You didn't just hurt Mom, you didn't just cheat, you destroyed everything. Leela began crying louder now, the kind of cry that came from not understanding, but feeling that something was terribly wrong. Denise pulled her close, her voice softer but still firm. This is what cheating does, she said, almost like she was speaking to more than just the room. It doesn't stay between two people. It spreads, it breaks trust, it steals futures, and it scars everyone it touches. The woman picked up her bag slowly. I didn't sign up for this, she said, her voice shaking. I thought I knew who you were. You did, Denise replied coldly. Just not all of him. The woman looked at Harold one last time, then turned and walked out the door without another word. The sound of it closing echoed, just like the glass breaking earlier. Final. But it wasn't really the end. Harold stood there, now alone in the middle of the wreckage he created. His family stared at him, not with love, not even just anger, but with something far worse. Disappointment. Marcus shook his head slowly. I don't even know who you are anymore. Denise didn't speak. She simply walked past Harold, guiding Leela toward her room. For the first time, Harold looked small. But just when it seemed like the worst had been revealed. Marcus spoke again. Wait, he said, his voice sharp. If the money is gone, then how are we still paying for the house? Denise stopped walking. Slowly, she turned back toward Harold. And the look on his face gave them their answer before he even spoke. There was something else. Something even worse. The question hung in the air like a storm about to break. If the money is gone, then how are we still paying for the house? Marcus's voice echoed in everyone's mind, even after he stopped speaking. Denise slowly turned back, her eyes narrowing as they settled on Harold. Answer him. Harold shifted his weight, his shoulders tense. For a moment, it looked like he might try to come up with another excuse, but something in Denise's expression told him that wouldn't work this time. I took a loan, he said finally. Marcus frowned. A loan from where? Harold hesitated again. That hesitation was all Denise needed. Not a bank, she said quietly. Is it? Harold looked away. The room went cold. Denise took a step closer, her voice dropping. Harold, who did you borrow money from? It's handled, he replied quickly. You don't need to worry about it. Don't need to worry, Marcus snapped. You already stole my college fund. Now you're saying there's some mystery loan we shouldn't worry about. Leela peeked from behind her mother, her tear-streaked face full of fear. Mommy, are we in trouble? Denise didn't answer her. She couldn't, not yet. Instead, she kept her eyes fixed on Harold. Tell me the truth, she said. All of it, no more lies. Harold exhaled slowly, as if the weight of everything was finally pressing down on him. It started small, he began. Just something to keep things balanced. I needed extra money, and I didn't want you to know how bad things were getting. What things? Marcus asked. My business, Harold admitted. It hasn't been doing well for years. Denise blinked. Years? You told me everything was fine. I didn't want you to worry, he said. So instead you lied, she replied sharply. Harold nodded, unable to argue with that. I took money from Marcus's fund thinking I'd replace it quickly, he continued. But then, things got worse. I fell behind, bills piled up, and then I met someone who said they could help. Denise's stomach tightened. Help how? Harold swallowed. They offered me cash, no paperwork, no questions. Marcus shook his head slowly. That's not help, that's a trap. I know that now, Harold said, his voice barely above a whisper. Denise crossed her arms. How much do you owe? Harold didn't answer immediately. How much? She repeated, louder this time. He finally looked up. 40,000. The number hit like a punch to the chest. Marcus staggered back slightly. 40,000? Are you serious? Denise felt her knees weaken, but she forced herself to stay standing. And you thought hiding this was the right choice. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out, Harold said. I didn't think it would come to this. But it has, Marcus said, and now we're all stuck in it with you. A heavy silence followed. Then, a loud knock at the door. Everyone froze. Leela clutched Denise's arm. Mommy, who is that? No one answered. The knock came again, louder this time, more forceful. Harold's face drained of color. Denise noticed immediately. Harold, who is at that door? He didn't move. The third knock came, followed by a deep voice from outside. We know you're in there. Marcus's heart started racing. Dad, what is this? Harold finally spoke, but his voice was filled with something none of them had ever heard from him before. Fear. I told you, he said slowly. It's not just a loan. Denise stepped back, pulling Leela closer. What did you get us into? The doorknob rattled slightly, as if whoever was outside was testing it. Marcus looked from the door to his father. You need to fix this, right now. But Harold didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the door like he already knew what would happen next. And then, the handle started turning. Someone was coming in. The door creaked open slowly. A tall man stepped inside first, his presence filling the room with a heavy, dangerous silence. Behind him stood another man, broader, his eyes scanning every corner like he was counting exits. They didn't shout. They didn't rush. That made it worse. Evening, the tall man said calmly, closing the door behind him. No one replied. Leela buried her face into Denise's side, trembling. Marcus instinctively stepped in front of them, his body tense despite the fear running through him. Harold finally moved, stepping forward with shaky legs. I told you I needed more time, he said. The tall man tilted his head slightly. And I told you time is not free. Denise's voice cut in, sharp but controlled. Who are you people, and why are you in my house? The man's eyes shifted to her, calm but cold. We're just here for what's owed. Marcus clenched his fists. You can't just walk in here like this. The second man chuckled under his breath. We just did. Harold raised his hand slightly. Please, don't do this in front of my family. The tall man sighed, as if disappointed. You should have thought about your family before taking money you couldn't return. Denise stepped forward now, standing beside Harold but not touching him. How much does he owe you? She asked. 40,000, the man replied. Denise nodded slowly. We'll find a way to pay it. Marcus looked at her in shock. Mom. But she didn't take her eyes off the man. Just give us time. The tall man studied her for a moment, then shook his head. Time is exactly what he ran out of. The room tightened again. Leela's soft crying filled the silence. Harold's voice cracked. I can get it, I just need a few more days. The second man stepped forward now, his patience clearly thinner. You said that last week. Marcus stepped closer. Listen, we're not running anywhere. We'll figure something out, just. Stay out of this, boy, the man snapped. That one word, boy, lit something in Marcus. Don't talk to me like that. Marcus, Denise warned. But it was too late. The second man grabbed Marcus by the shirt, pulling him forward. You got a problem. Let him go, Denise shouted. Leela screamed. Harold rushed forward. Please, he has nothing to do with this. The tall man raised a hand slightly. Enough. The second man released Marcus, but not without a hard shove that sent him stumbling backward. Careful, the tall man said calmly. This isn't what we came for. Marcus regained his balance, breathing hard, anger and fear mixing inside him. The tall man turned back to Harold. Here, what's going to happen, he said. You have until tomorrow night. Denise's heart dropped. That's not enough time. It's more than he deserves, the man replied. And if we can't get it, Harold asked quietly. The man paused. Then he looked around the room, at Denise, at Marcus, and finally at Leela. You don't want to find out. The meaning was clear, without needing more words. Leela clung tighter to her mother, her small body shaking uncontrollably. Denise's voice broke slightly. Please, she's just a child. The man's expression didn't change. Then you better make sure he fixes his mistakes. He turned toward the door, signaling the other man. But just as they were about to leave, a loud crash came from outside. Everyone froze. Then came shouting. Then the unmistakable sound of tires screeching, followed by a violent bang that shook the walls. Leela screamed again. Marcus rushed to the window. What was that? Denise's heart pounded as she moved closer. Outside, chaos. A car had slammed into the front gate, metal twisted, smoke rising into the night air. And lying just a few feet away, not moving, was someone. Denise's breath caught. Oh my God. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. That's Mrs. Carter from next door. The world seemed to stop. Leela began crying uncontrollably. Is she okay? But no one answered. Because deep down, they already knew. The tall man by the door glanced outside, then back at Harold. And for the first time, even he looked slightly unsettled. Tomorrow night, he repeated quietly. Then they walked out, leaving behind a house filled with fear. And a tragedy that had just begun. The sirens came too late. By the time the ambulance arrived, the street was already filled with neighbors standing at a distance, whispering, pointing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of the house, turning everything into a blur of fear and confusion. Inside, Denise stood frozen near the window, her hands trembling as she watched the paramedics kneel beside Mrs. Carter. Marcus had stepped outside, despite her warning. Marcus, come back, she had called. But he didn't listen. Now he stood near the gate, his face pale as he watched the scene unfold. He had known Mrs. Carter his whole life. She used to bring cookies over during holidays, always smiling, always kind. Now she wasn't moving. One of the paramedics slowly stood up and shook his head. Marcus felt something inside him drop. No, he whispered. A police officer approached him gently. Son, you need to step back. Marcus didn't move. Is she gone? The officer hesitated, then nodded slightly. That was all it took. Marcus staggered backward, his chest tightening as the reality hit him like a wave. Inside the house, Leela's cries had softened into quiet sobs. Denise held her close, rocking her gently, though her own mind was racing. Dead. Mrs. Carter was dead. And it happened right outside their home. Harold stood in the middle of the living room, unmoving, his face blank like he hadn't fully processed what just happened. But deep down, something was beginning to settle in. This wasn't just his problem anymore. This was spreading. Just like Denise said. The front door opened, and Marcus walked back in slowly. His eyes were red, his expression distant. "She's gone," he said quietly. Leela cried harder. Denise closed her eyes briefly, holding her daughter tighter. "Oh God." Marcus looked at his father. And in that moment, there was no anger in his eyes. Just something colder. "This is because of you." Harold flinched. "Marcus." "No," Marcus cut him off. "If those men didn't come here, if all of this didn't happen, she would still be alive." "That's not fair," Harold said, but even he didn't sound convinced. "It is fair," Marcus replied. "You brought danger to this house, you brought it to our street, and now someone is dead." The words hung heavy in the room. Denise slowly looked up at Harold, her voice barely above a whisper. "I warned you, this doesn't just hurt us, it spreads." A loud knock came at the door again, this time official, controlled. "Police." Harold froze. Denise wiped her face quickly and stood up, adjusting her voice as best as she could before opening the door. Two officers stood there. "Ma'am," one of them began, "we need to ask a few questions about what happened tonight." Denise nodded slowly. "Of course." The officers stepped inside, their presence adding another layer of pressure to an already breaking situation. "Were you aware of any suspicious individuals in the area?" one officer asked. Denise hesitated. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Harold. Marcus noticed. And so did the officer. "Ma'am," he pressed gently. Denise swallowed. This was it. Tell the truth, and everything changes. Or stay silent, and protect the man who had already destroyed so much. Before she could answer, Marcus spoke. "They were here," he said. Denise turned sharply. "Marcus." But he didn't stop. "Two men came into our house. They were threatening him," he added, pointing at Harold. The officers immediately shifted their attention. "Threatening him?" one asked. Marcus nodded. "He owes them money." The room went still. Harold closed his eyes. Denise's heart sank. There was no going back now. The officer turned to Harold. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us and explain everything." Leela looked up in confusion. "Mommy, where are they taking Daddy?" Denise couldn't answer. Harold slowly raised his hands, not resisting. But as the officer stepped forward to escort him, Harold spoke. "Wait," he said. Everyone paused. "There's something you need to know," he added, his voice heavy. Denise's stomach tightened. "What is it?" she asked. Harold looked at all of them, his family, the officers, the broken room around him. And then he said the words that made everything worse. The accident wasn't random. The officers exchanged a glance. "What do you mean?" one asked. Harold's voice dropped. "They weren't just here for me." A chilling silence followed. Then Marcus spoke, his voice barely steady. "Then who were they really after?" Harold didn't answer immediately. But when he did, everything changed. They were watching this house long before tonight. The room seemed to shrink around Harold's words. They were watching this house long before tonight. Denise felt a chill crawl up her spine. "Watching for what?" she asked slowly. The police officers stiffened. One of them stepped closer to Harold. "You need to explain that, now." Harold hesitated, his eyes flicking toward Leela, then Marcus, then back to Denise. For a moment, it looked like he might hold it in again, but everything had already gone too far. "I didn't just borrow money," he said quietly. "I got involved in something bigger." Marcus shook his head. "How much bigger?" Harold swallowed. Those men, they don't just lend money, they move things, cash, goods, sometimes information. The officer's tone hardened. Are you saying you're connected to a criminal network? I didn't know at first, Harold insisted. I thought it was just quick money, but once I took it, I was in. Denise's voice trembled. What does that have to do with us, with this house? Harold closed his eyes briefly. They used this address. The words hit harder than anything before. Marcus stepped back. Used how? For deliveries, Harold admitted. Packages would come here when no one was around. I'd move them later. Denise's face went pale. You brought that into our home, into a house with your children. I didn't think it would last this long, he said. I thought I could stop before it got dangerous. But it did get dangerous, Marcus snapped. It's been dangerous. The officer spoke again. What kind of packages? Harold shook his head. I didn't always know, and I didn't ask. That's not good enough, the officer replied sharply. Leela's small voice broke through. Mommy, are we bad people? Denise dropped to her knees immediately, holding her daughter's face gently. No, baby. No, we are not. But her voice cracked. Because everything around them said otherwise. Marcus turned away, packing. So they've been watching us, using our house, and now someone is dead outside because of it. Harold didn't respond. The truth was already clear. Denise stood slowly, her expression no longer just hurt. It was something stronger now. Resolve. You've done enough, she said firmly. You don't get to protect them anymore. You tell the officers everything. Harold looked at her, pain in his eyes. If I talk, it won't just be me in danger. Denise didn't hesitate. We are already in danger. The officers nodded. She's right. The only way to protect your family now is full cooperation. A heavy silence followed. Then Harold gave a small, defeated nod. Okay, he said. I'll tell you everything I know. Relief didn't come. Because it wasn't over. Not even close. Outside, the flashing lights continued. The stretcher carrying Mrs. Carter was being loaded into the ambulance, covered now. Neighbors whispered more loudly, fear spreading from house to house. Inside, the truth was finally coming out. But truth had a cost, and they were about to pay it. As one officer began writing notes, the other stepped toward the door, speaking into his radio. Marcus leaned against the wall, his energy drained. What happens now? He asked. No one answered immediately. Because no one knew. Then, Leela tugged at Denise's sleeve. Mommy, she said softly, my chest hurts. Denise turned instantly. What do you mean? Leela placed a small hand over her chest, her face tightening. It feels funny, like it's squeezing. Denise's heart skipped. Marcus, get water. But before he could move, Leela suddenly collapsed. Everything happened at once. Lila, Denise screamed, dropping to the floor beside her. Marcus rushed forward, panic flooding his face. What's happening? The officers reacted quickly, one of them kneeling beside Leela, checking her breathing. She's not responding, he said urgently. Denise's hands shook as she held her daughter. No, baby, wake up. Harold's face turned pale as he dropped to his knees. Leela, please. The officer grabbed his radio. We need medical assistance inside, child unconscious. Outside, the paramedics turned back toward the house. Seconds felt like hours. Denise's voice broke completely. Please don't do this, not my baby. Marcus stood frozen, tears streaming down his face as he watched his little sister lying still on the floor. And Harold could only stare. Because in that moment, it became painfully clear. His choices hadn't just brought danger to the door. They had brought it inside. Have you ever seen how one decision can destroy so many lives at once? What would you have done if you were Denise at this moment? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story is touching you deeply, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others. Because stories like this carry lessons we can't afford to ignore. Now the question is, Will Leela survive this? The house that once held laughter was now filled with panic. Paramedics rushed in, their footsteps quick and urgent. One of them gently moved Denise aside. "Ma'am, we need space," he said, already checking Leela's pulse. Denise backed away slowly, her hands shaking, her eyes never leaving her daughter. "Please, please help her," she whispered. Marcus stood frozen near the wall, his mind unable to process everything happening at once. Just minutes ago, they were dealing with betrayal, with secrets, with danger outside. Now it was inside. Now it was Leela. "Her pulse is weak," one paramedic said. "We need to move now," another responded. They lifted Leela onto a stretcher, working quickly but carefully. Harold stepped forward, desperation written all over his face. "I'm coming with her." One of the officers stopped him. "Not right now." Harold stared at him. "That's my daughter." "And you're still under investigation," the officer replied firmly. "You'll follow after we sort this." Denise didn't even look at Harold. "I'm going," she said, already moving toward the door. Marcus followed immediately. "Me too." The stretcher rolled out of the house, the flashing ambulance lights reflecting off Leela's still face. Denise climbed in beside her, gripping her hand tightly. "Stay with me, baby, stay with me." The doors slammed shut. And just like that, the ambulance sped off into the night. The hospital waiting room felt colder than anything they had faced so far. Denise sat hunched forward, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes red and empty. Marcus paced back and forth, his movements restless, like he couldn't sit still with the weight pressing down on him. Time moved slowly. Too slowly. Every second felt like a test they weren't prepared for. After what felt like forever, a doctor finally walked in. Denise shot to her feet. "My daughter, how is she?" The doctor's expression was serious but calm. "She's stable for now." Denise exhaled sharply, her knees almost giving out. Marcus rushed to steady her. "What happened to her?" Marcus asked. The doctor glanced between them. She had a severe panic-induced episode. Her heart rate spiked dangerously, and her body couldn't handle the stress. Denise closed her eyes, pain washing over her face. "She's just a child." "She's strong," the doctor said, "but she needs rest, and more importantly, she needs a safe, calm environment." The word safe echoed loudly in Denise's mind. Safe? That was something they no longer had. "Can we see her?" Denise asked. The doctor nodded, one at a time. Denise didn't hesitate. She walked quickly down the hallway, her heart pounding with every step. When she entered the room, the sight nearly broke her. Leela lay on the hospital bed, small and fragile, tubes attached, machines beeping softly beside her. Her eyes were closed, her face pale. Denise approached slowly, sitting beside her. "I'm here, baby," she whispered, brushing Leela's hair gently. "Mommy's here." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Leela's fingers twitched slightly. Denise's breath caught. "Leela," she whispered. Slowly, Leela's eyes fluttered open. "Mommy," she said weakly. Tears streamed down Denise's face. "Yes, baby, I'm here." Leela looked at her, confusion and fear still in her eyes. "Are we safe now?" The question cut deep. Denise forced a soft smile, though her heart was heavy. "You will be," she said gently. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure it was true. Back at the house, Harold sat in silence, surrounded by officers. The weight of everything had finally settled on him completely. Mrs. Carter was gone. His daughter was in the hospital. His son no longer looked at him the same. And his wife. She was already slipping away from him. One of the officers stepped forward. "We're going to need names, locations, everything." Harold nodded slowly. "I'll tell you." He began speaking, giving details, exposing the network he had been caught in. Each word felt like another nail, sealing his fate. But as he spoke, another officer rushed into the room. "Sir," he said urgently, "we just got an update." The first officer looked up. "What is it?" The second officer hesitated for a second, then said, "The car that hit the neighbor. It wasn't an accident." Harold's head snapped up. "What?" The officer's voice was firm. "It was intentional." The room went silent. Harold's heart began to pound again, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was realization. If that wasn't an accident, then this wasn't just about money anymore. This was something far darker. And his family was right in the middle of it. The word intentional refused to settle. Harold stared at the officer like he hadn't heard correctly. "No, that doesn't make sense," he said, shaking his head. "They came for me, just me." The officer didn't argue. The driver didn't lose control. Witnesses say the car sped up when Mrs. Carter stepped out. Harold's stomach dropped. "So it was a warning," he whispered. "Or a message," the officer replied. Across town, in the hospital, Denise sat beside Leela's bed, watching every rise and fall of her chest like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Marcus stood near the window, his arms folded tight, staring out at the dark parking lot. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then froze. Unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again. Then again. Denise noticed. "Marcus, what is it?" He hesitated, then answered, keeping his voice low. "Hello." For a second, there was only silence. Then a voice came through, calm, steady, and cold. "You should answer when we call." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" "You already know," the voice replied. "We were at your house tonight." Marcus's heart started racing. He turned away from Denise, lowering his voice further. "Why are you calling me?" A soft chuckle came through the line. "Because your father is talking." Marcus's chest tightened. "Talking about what?" "About us," the voice said simply. "And that makes things complicated." Marcus swallowed hard. "What do you want?" "Simple," the voice replied. "You tell him to stop." Marcus glanced at his mother, then back toward the hallway where Leela lay. "You don't understand," Marcus said. "This has gone too far." "No," the voice corrected. "It hasn't gone far enough." Marcus felt a chill run through him. "What does that mean?" he asked. There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again, quieter this time. "It means the next message won't miss." The call ended. Marcus stood there, frozen. "Marcus," Denise said, her voice filled with concern. "Who was that?" He slowly lowered the phone. "They said Dad needs to stop talking," he said. Denise's face went still. "Or what?" Marcus looked at her, fear clear in his eyes. "Or the next time, they won't miss." The words hit harder than anything before. Denise turned back to Leela, her heart racing. Safe. The doctor said Leela needed a safe place. But there was no safe place anymore. Not here. Not at home. Nowhere. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "We have to tell the police." Denise nodded slowly. "We will." But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Because whoever these people were, they were watching. They were listening. And they were always one step ahead. Back at the house, Harold sat across from the officers, his voice low as he continued giving details. "They operate in different parts of the city," he said. "But the ones who came tonight, they report to someone higher. I never met him, just heard the name." "What name?" the officer asked. Harold hesitated. Then, a loud crash came from the back of the house. Everyone jumped to their feet. "What was that?" one officer said, already moving. Another crash followed, glass shattering this time. "They're here," Harold whispered, fear flooding his voice. The officers drew their weapons, moving cautiously toward the sound. Harold stayed where he was, his heart pounding violently. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. A voice echoed faintly from the back. "You talk too much, Harold." Harold's blood ran cold. He knew that voice. The same calm, dangerous tone. The same one from earlier. Footsteps crept closer. Slow. Deliberate. The officers moved into position, but something was wrong. Too quiet. Too controlled. Then, a single loud bang rang out. The house fell silent. One of the officers shouted, "Stay down." Harold dropped to the floor, covering his head. His ears rang. His heart raced. Seconds passed. Then more footsteps. And then, another voice, closer now. "You should have kept your mouth shut." Harold slowly lifted his head, his breath shaky. "What do you want?" he called out. A shadow appeared in the hallway. "We want balance," the voice replied. Harold's mind raced. "I told them everything. You don't need to do this." The shadow stepped closer, just enough for Harold to see the outline of a figure. "Oh, we do," the man said calmly, "because you forgot something important." Harold's chest tightened. "What?" The man paused, then said, "Actions have consequences." Another bang echoed through the house. And this time, there was no mistaking it. Someone had been shot. Harold's world stopped. Because deep down, he knew exactly who it might be. And if he was right, there was no fixing this anymore. The silence after the gunshot was worse than the sound itself. Harold's ears rang as he lay frozen on the floor, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then a voice shouted from down the hallway. "Officer down." Everything snapped back into motion. More officers rushed forward, their voices urgent, controlled but shaken. Harold slowly pushed himself up, his body trembling as he looked toward the hallway. "No," he whispered. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. The shadowy figure had already disappeared, slipping into the night like he was never there. But the damage was done. At the hospital, Denise's phone rang. She stared at the screen, her chest tightening as she saw an unknown number again. Marcus noticed immediately. "Don't answer it," he said quickly. But Denise hesitated. What if it wasn't them? What if it was important? Her hand shook as she answered. "Hello." A familiar, calm voice responded. "It's done." Denise's heart dropped. "What have you done?" A brief pause. Then, he should have listened. The call ended. Denise lowered the phone slowly, her face drained of color. Marcus stepped closer. "Mom, what did they say?" Her voice barely came out. "It's done." Marcus felt a wave of dread hit him. "What does that mean?" Before Denise could answer, a doctor rushed into the room. "Are you Denise?" he asked urgently. Her heart nearly stopped. "Yes, what is it? Is it Leela?" "No," the doctor said quickly. "Your daughter is stable, but we just received a call from the police." Denise's breath caught. Marcus already knew. Something else had happened. "They said there's been another incident at your home," the doctor continued carefully. "You need to come with us." Denise felt her legs weaken. Another incident. She didn't want to ask, but she had to. "Who?" she whispered. The doctor hesitated, then said the words that would stay with them forever. "Your husband has been shot." The world moved in slow motion after that. Denise and Marcus sat in silence as they were driven back, the flashing lights reflecting off their faces once again. But this time, there were no questions. Only dread. When they arrived, the house was surrounded again. More officers. More lights. More whispers. Denise stepped out of the car slowly, her body heavy, her heart numb. Marcus followed beside her, his jaw clenched tight. They were led inside. And there, on the same floor where everything had started, Harold lay still. Paramedics worked over him, but their movements had already slowed. Denise stopped walking. This was the man who had broken her trust. The man who had lied. The man who had brought danger into their home. And yet, he was still the father of her children. Is he? Marcus began but couldn't finish. One of the paramedics looked up and gently shook his head. Denise closed her eyes. Not out of love, not out of forgiveness, but out of the weight of everything that had been lost. Marcus turned away, anger and grief colliding inside him. This didn't have to happen, he said. Denise nodded slowly. No, she replied, it didn't. Days later, the house felt empty. Too quiet. Too heavy. Leela was back home, still recovering, her laughter gone softer, her eyes more cautious. Marcus had changed too, more serious, more distant. And Denise. Denise was different in a way that couldn't be undone. She stood in the living room, looking at the broken picture frame still lying where it fell. She didn't pick it up. She just looked at it. A cheating husband doesn't just hurt his wife, she said softly, almost like she was speaking to someone who wasn't there anymore. He scars the family. Marcus stood behind her, listening. Leela held onto her hand. 3 lives. Forever changed. Not just by betrayal, but by everything that came after it. Denise finally turned away from the broken frame. We're leaving this house, she said firmly. We start over, somewhere safe. Marcus nodded. Leela squeezed her hand. And for the first time in a long time, there was a small, quiet sense of hope. Not because things were okay, but because they had survived. Sometimes the damage caused by one person's choices goes far beyond what anyone can see. It spreads, it breaks, and it leaves scars that last a lifetime. What would you have done if you were in Denise's position? Would you have stayed or walked away sooner? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others, because stories like this remind us how powerful our choices really are. Because in the end, every action has a consequence, and some consequences change everything.